Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is the group Religions for Peace doing to bring a large number of the major religions and also indigenous religions around the world together to promote a better world and to help reduce conflict? My guest today is going to bring us up to date on this very interesting group and some of the activities they have underway. My next guest today is Dr. William Vendley. Dr. William Vendley, a U.S. national, has an M.A. from Mary Knowles School of Theology and a Ph.D. from Fordham University. He is currently the Secretary General of the World Conference of Religions for Peace. Dr. William Vendley, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Bill, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you here.
I appreciate you being back. We did this about 4 years ago, and
That's right.
It's time for an update. I know you have a lot of interesting activities underway. Let's just start off with a basic overview of what is the group Religions for Peace. When was it formed? Why was it formed?
Bill, we're here in the United Nations. The nations built a mechanism for their collaboration. The religions, which predate all of our states, did the same thing with Religions for Peace. We need a mechanism that we are going to oversee, we're going to lead, in which doctrines are respected as particular to each religion, but deeply held and widely shared moral values can become the platform for common action. And Religions for Peace started in 1970, just with that formula, and has grown around the world, operating in over 90 countries, and using the already existing religious communities in partnerships with each other to tackle the big, tough challenges that our human family faces.
And of course, our viewers can go to your website, www.rfp.org, to get more information. All religions have their own unique tenets. They have their values, they have their beliefs, that type of thing. There's a lot of diversity, but there's still a large commonality amongst every human on the planet, all 7.4 billion of us.
That's right.
And it's great to bring them together to focus on this commonality and to see where they can work together. Now, of the religious groups, what is your basic membership look like? I mean, do you have the four major religions, indigenous religions?
All of the major historic religions are participants in Religions for Peace. When I say the historic religions, let's not forget the indigenous religions that are spread around the world. These are many. They are many, many and diverse. But today, happily, there are associations of indigenous religions. So they can all find membership in Religions for Peace that way. But then the big historic religions and the smaller historic religions are happily right in the center of Religions for Peace.
How do you communicate with this diverse community around the world? We're talking billions of people. How do you stay in touch with them? Do you have workshops? Do you bring leaders to New York, to the UN? Do you go to regional meetings?
So we're convening. So where are the religious people? Well, they're local. They live in localities, cities, small towns. They're also organized nationally. And they're organized by continental ways. If you go to Africa, you'll find an All-African Council of Churches or a Hindu Council of Africa. And then they're globally organized. So we build Religions for Peace on those four levels: global, regional, national, and local, because that's where the religious people are, and that's where they want to cooperate.
Interesting, very interesting. Well, we'll jump into some of the issues today. Many of the scientists, in fact, the vast majority of scientists believe that climate change is our #1 problem. We see that the seas are rising, the glaciers are melting, the deserts are expanding, just all types of natural phenomena are linked to climate change. How does your group view this whole issue of climate change, and what are some of the areas that you're focusing on?
Well, Bill, we would turn to the world's very best scientists, many of them in relationship with the UN, and we would try to study the problem. We don't pretend the religious communities are the best qualified to study the actual dynamics of this problem. So let's all be students to the best we all have. But once it becomes clear that in fact, collectively, we are threatening the very ecological order which allowed us to arise as a species, then we realize that we're in a grave contradiction. how would we ever go about destroying the very conditions of the possibility of our own thriving? It becomes a moral issue. And now the religions are seized by this. And if you turn to Islam, you'll find Muslims searching the conscience of Islam to understand how Islam has to take a stance on this crisis. True of every one of the religious communities. And we are all in a consensus that we've got to collaborate and turn this around, that to be a Hindu or a Buddhist or a Muslim or a Jain or a Sikh or a Jew or a Christian means you have to connect the dot between your moral heritage and this crisis. You've got to be an agent of constructive change.
Not only is this a natural phenomenon that's affecting everybody on the planet, nobody can escape climate change. Some people are suffering more than others.
That's right.
Definitely lower income, poor people around the world are suffering much more than the 1% who are not poor. And of course the poor people didn't create the problem.
That's right.
Which is 95% of it was human induced according to the scientists. So it is something that we all need to focus upon. Do you have a consensus of your leaders, of the religious leaders, that first off, climate change is happening, secondly, we need to be working on it together, and thirdly, do they have recommendations on what we can do
Absolutely.
to
all three,
overcome this problem?
All three. So again, the religious communities want to be the students of the best science we have on this. Now that science is, there is an emerging consensus among the overwhelming majority of scientists. So we take that seriously. So now the question is, what kind of action is required? Well, we've got to decarbonize the way we get energy. Our global GDP is about $128 trillion a year. It would take less than 1% per annum to mount a genuine decarbonization of our global energy systems. So, Bill, this means that it's technically possible. It's just going to require enormous political will and enormous communal will and personal will to achieve this. So religions know something about that, and they recognize they need to, first of all, be in the education business. This is a real problem. It's a moral problem. It's a religious problem. You've got to take it seriously. Secondly, they need to be advocates. But third, they have to green their own congregations. We want to see every congregation in the world of all the different religious traditions, not just telling, but showing how we need to live in terms of a ecologically sustainable lifestyle.
And of course we've seen that we can decarbonize, we can get off of fossil fuels, we are moving swiftly away from coal, oil won't be too far behind probably, we're still going to use it for a while, but some countries are already just on the brink of being fossil fuel free.
That's right.
Denmark comes to mind.
That's right.
Costa Rica comes to mind. So there are countries out there that are doing it.
That's
if
right.
a few can do it, they're prototypes, the rest of us could.
Well, that's right. That's right. And again, without being too technical, we're not paying the true cost of fossil fuels. Economists call these externalities. The real cost of damaging our environment financially, the real cost of that should be factored into what we actually pay at the pump. If it was, already the alternative fuels would be cost efficient. In other words, we're subsidizing a very expensive fuel and we don't pay its true costs because we don't pay the hundreds, even thousands of years of ecological damage that are consequent from huge amounts of CO2 going into the environment.
And if we were paying $10 a gallon, we would certainly move very quickly.
You'd find amazing alternatives.
We'd have solar plates on our car, right up on the roof.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
Exactly.
Well, so many of the world leaders have weighed in. I remember Pope Francis came down very strongly and had some very, very strong words to encourage people to start getting serious about this. Or you mentioned a minute ago about the ethics. You brought that term up. Are you doing anything in particular on ethical involvement with climate change or the Sustainable Development Goals?
And it's linked to the person, the Pope that you just mentioned, we're fully multi-religious. So every religion has our deepest respect, and we're looking at all the religions as allies. So we're here confronted with a common problem and trying to resolve it. But the Pope, as you mentioned, in an encyclical, which is a teaching document that the Pope can issue, has issued a call, and he's addressed this, of course, to the believers of his own tradition, but he's really addressed it to all men and women of goodwill. And he's explicitly called in his own letter, the encyclical, for interreligious collaboration on this issue. So we're heartened by that, because when the Buddhists bring forth something that's of terrific value for all of us, it only encourages the next religion to, in a sense, bring their goods forward to help all of us. What we do, Bill, is that about every 3 months, we convene in the Vatican, in the Vatican Pontifical Academy of Science. So this is an institution where Galileo was a member, and most of the Nobel Prize winners are members. But we gather with religions, the world's religions, with the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. These are the best development experts around the world, and Religions for Peace, and some universities. And we're looking at the ethical dimension of these challenges. They're technical problems, but insofar as it takes human effort, human will to tackle them, they're ethical challenges. And so these two are related, the technical challenges and the ethical challenges. So religions need to step up on the ethical side and to help their own believers understand that they're not being a faithful believer if they're not dealing with the very threats that impugn our human dignity and our common good. And so I'm very happy to say these are very productive, fruitful. We then go and we share them with the UN Secretary General, with heads of state. They become these pieces of work become widely available to policy groups, the European Union, the other regional intergovernmental policy fora. So this is a role that I think we can all play.
And you have a large audience out there who can really make a tremendous difference, who can really make that extra effort, shall we say, in helping to help create this better world. But it's important that we all work on this together. We were talking about sustainable development, and of course that flashes us back to the Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted in September of 2015, building upon the old Millennium Development Goals. And of course there's 17 logical, measurable, achievable goals between 2016 and 2030, such as to eliminate poverty, to eliminate poverty completely, to eliminate hunger, to combat climate change. These are goals that are being coalesced around by literally billions of people and tens of thousands of organizations around the world. Rotary clubs, Kiwanis clubs, not all 17 of them, but certain ones that are of interest. Do these all come into play when you're involved with your leaders and talking about what you can do to help improve the situation in the world?
Very much so. We're grateful for the work of the states to adopt these as goals. These aren't goals for any select group of people, for those who are economically impoverished or for those facing one dilemma or the other. These are goals for our human family. These are goals that apply to all of us. And they come out of the fact that we all live on a small world together. So we're encouraged and impressed that the human family, through its governments, can build a consensus that we've got to all work on this for what we'll call the common good. We're going to all thrive together, or we're not going to thrive. And this is a maturing moment for the human family. Ideally, we've always wanted this. The religions have, in their own ways, called for this. But now it's practically true, Bill. If we don't do this, we're not going to go forward in a sense of real flourishing. So we're pleased about this. We need to be stakeholders, all of us, and we simply do this. The world's religions have spent, in some cases, millennia building their religious communities. They help them pass their community through time. New generations are brought in. But that massive building that's gone across centuries puts in place a remarkable infrastructure where people gather, in many cases once a week, and they're morally oriented about how they would direct their lives. All of that is now becoming the open platform to tackle these problems in an honest way for these religious communities.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We would invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with any type of PBS or community access television station, or perhaps you're with an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you maybe just have a website and you'd like to share our shows, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost to help people better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today we're taking a look at a very unique organization called Religions for Peace and talking about how the religions, all types of religions, every person around the world has a role to play in helping to overcome many of our problems. My guest is an expert on this. He is the Secretary General of Religions for Peace, Dr. William Vendley. Dr. Vendley, we're talking about, we're taking care of the climate change problem, so that's out of the way. Let's shift to another very imminent problem, and that is the nuclear confrontation that's really taking place or potentially taking place with North Korea. Is this an issue that's on your radar screen? Is this something that people realize can really spin out of control, perhaps on purpose or perhaps accidentally, if there's some type of a nuclear confrontation between, be it the United States and North Korea or whomever may be involved in this?
So, Bill, nuclear weapons, which have been with us since the end of the Second World War, were really at the heart of the formation of Religions for Peace. There's a general consensus that you can't kill masses of innocent people. This is prescribed by all of the deeply reflective, very realistic moral heritages that the world's religions have. So that's been an issue of growing consensus across traditions. We cannot use nuclear weapons on innocent people. They're targeted at your grandparents, your grandchildren, your brothers, your sisters, your families, hospitals, schools. There's no way not to target them to those mass populations of cities. So that's a ever more firm consensus across the different religious traditions. Now, we have them, and they're dangerous. And we are not, all of us have had little, or known people have had little traffic accidents, despite all of the safety precautions. So we face not only the danger of military use, but we face the danger of accidents, and accidents that could even be interpreted as an offensive military action. So we're in a perilous situation with these weapons. In that situation, you need confidence-building channels. And here, however humbly, the religious communities, all the people, I'm presuming, in religions, love their countries, have deep moral perspectives, but they're willing to reach across the table and say, that's a human being on that side of the table. They have a government, maybe I disagree with it, but that's a human being. How are we going to build those links? And ultimately, they can help the governments to solve these problems. So even though there is a political difficulty, Religions for Peace has retained a vital link with the religious communities in North Korea. And from time to time, we're able to meet on a global forum where the religious communities from the North and the religious communities from the South can meet each other. After all, they're relatives. And we are actively engaged in keeping those channels open, honest, respectful, that we're not governments and that we want good governments, all of us. But we believe that's terribly, terribly important as we speak. Those decades of connections remain robust, and we are in active communication with all the relevant parties.
Exactly. And it is, some of the articles I read not too long ago, and they still be applicable, indicate that for what one nuclear submarine costs, we could wipe out illiteracy all around the world for one nuclear submarine. Russia and the United States right now are talking about rebuilding their nuclear weapons stockpile because they're getting old. They're getting antiquated. There is a chance an accident could happen. The U.S. alone is looking at $1.2 trillion. That's a rock bottom figure. It'll be 2 to 3 trillion. We know how that goes in the defense industry. But these are serious issues, and that money could be better spent trying to denuclearize the world and also to make the world safer. Before we run out of time, though, we've got to talk about immigration. This is another major challenge. We've seen migrants flowing out of northern Africa. We see the horrific situation in Syria. What is Religions for Peace doing to help alleviate this particular problem, or to help people try to deal with it?
Well, first of all, there are religious communities in the countries from which people are fleeing. There are religious communities in the countries through which they transit, and there are religious communities in the countries where they hope to settle. And so one of the things that we would do is try to build the links across those religious communities, across those countries, so they would recognize that they're all part of that drama of the refugee population, and that they all have their unique roles. But secondly, Bill, and maybe very importantly, what is operating today that makes the real problems, they're real, but so much harder, is a climate of fear. And people are frightened. They're frightened perhaps of the other people they don't know. So we have mounted a global campaign, Faith Over Fear, in which we don't just tell people, we show people. Here's a Jewish family in Germany celebrating Shabbat with Muslim refugees, and look at them. They're thrilled to be with each other. And one example after the other where the message is in the people themselves. On the one hand, one group of human beings are helping another group, but that's always a two-way street. And the people who are offering the help report to you, and their faces show you they're telling the truth, that they feel their own humanity is enriched and enlarged by being in association with these beautiful people that have had to leave their homes. So we think that's the normal human reaction. People are in need, and let's reach out an arm. And on both sides of that exchange, there's a human factor that goes right to the core of what it means to be a person. So let's drive the fear out of this phenomena. We've got to tackle root causes. Why are people leaving their homes? And then we've got to deal with the fact that even as we struggle to address those, these are real people with children. How are we going to deal with this? So we don't pretend that it's easy, but let's bring the depth of our humanity to this challenge, and not fear. This is not going to help us to solve the problem.
Well, Global Connections Television is viewed by millions of people around the world, many of whom are involved with your group. In the last 30 seconds, do you have a message of peace for these people?
Well, I do have a message of peace. Peace is actually the original reality itself. We grieve over the fact that we hurt each other as people. But all of our religions counsel that reality is ultimately so good that people reach and discover compassion and forgiveness within their own hearts and with their own societies. It's not a license to do bad things. It's an encouragement that, in fact, reality is on our side if we would roll our sleeves up and work together.
It certainly is. Well, Dr. William Vendley, Secretary General of Religions for Peace, you're doing some remarkable work. You're bringing together religious leaders and their congregations to try to focus on these problems, because we do have to work on these together. There is no planet B, as the former Secretary General of the UN used to say. It's not out there. We're not going to move to Mars. We can't do that. We've got to deal with this planet, and we can't destroy it or we destroy ourselves. But I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Pleasure's mine, Bill. Thanks so much.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.